Hard right Republicans are typically some of the biggest bootlickers in the country, and it's particularly shameful. Why? Because they pretend like they're not. They do this whole facade of, oh, we're the ones speaking truth to power, we're the ones telling it like it is. We are skeptical of power. The left bends the knee. The left are the real bootlickers. We're not bootlickers. Well, look at the politicians they vote for. They vote for Republicans who, once they get a trifecta, always in modern history, cut taxes for the extremely wealthy, cut taxes for corporations, allow corporations to just brazenly pollute the environment, whereas Democrats at least don't do that. So they are very favorable toward the powerful, and these politicians, they'll never admit, oh yeah, my donors made me do this. They'll say, oh, we're fighting for freedom. We're fighting for freedom. Freedom for your environment to get polluted, freedom for corporations to make more profit, but not you. Freedom for corporations to continue price gouging, raising your prices at the grocery store. So these corporations control the Republican Party. They do. They control some Democrats as well. But I'm here to talk about, why do Republicans pretend like, oh yeah, no, we're anti-power. We're against the establishment. One of the things I've heard, a justification for the Republican Party's policies from a Republican voter, is that, well, there's kind of this dichotomy we have to entertain. It's a lesser of two evils thing. Do we want to be controlled by big government or by big business, they will say. And I would rather be controlled by big business, because at least big business can't bring guns to your house. They can't lock you up in jail or in prison, right? Well, I'm sorry to say, that still makes you a bootlicker. You're still simping for big business. You're still simping for the people in power. And in fact, when you're simping for big business while they've got the government's back and the government's got their back, that makes you even more of a bootlicker than if you just simped for the government or just simped for big business on its own. So they've got a lot of problems with how they argue this. They say, well, we need to support big business. We need to support corporate tax cuts, because if we don't, the government's just going to run roughshod over us. They'll say, oh, the government can't raise taxes on the wealthy to 90%. That would be insane. That would be authoritarian. That would be socialism or communism. Look at what happened in Venezuela, they say. Cuba. They will point out all of these things. But they never really explain how these policies in and of themselves are socialism, how they are authoritarian, and how these policies will personally harm consumers like them. Middle class Republicans, upper middle class, lower middle class, who are like, oh, I'm scared of, if government raises taxes on the wealthy to 53% or something like that, well, what's next? It's going to be 99% for me. They're going to take all but 1% of my income, and then I'm going to be broke. They do this type of fear mongering. So they justify extreme corporate power and maintaining that corporate power by saying, well, government is just worse. Big government is worse. And they'll also say, oh yeah, no, we don't want to raise the federal minimum wage. What on earth? We don't want the federal government to tell businesses what they have to pay employees. Okay, so you think that they should just have unbridled authority, corporations, to pay them whatever they want. 16 cents an hour, dude. Sorry, yeah, that's what I want to pay you. Deal with it. I have the discretion. The government said that I'm allowed to, and so that's just, again, bootlicking, saying, oh, whatever, big business, they have the best judgment in the country. They know how to run things. Yeah, no, they can make these calls. Leave the government out of it. Now, look, we have to elect people who are prudent into the government. It is understandable that, okay, we don't want the government to have too much power, generally speaking. Conservatives are right about that. But where they're wrong is saying we can justify being completely deferential to corporate interests and big business interests by saying government is worse, actually. Government is really bad. I'm really scared of government. The government does not typically overreach in cases involving the economy. And if anything, it has been underreaching. FDR's New Deal, which a lot of conservatives at the time called socialism. They said, this guy's going to become a dictator with these crazy alphabet agency experiments. Watch out for him. We got to beat him. FDR's New Deal is being dismantled as we speak. I mean, it got dismantled even under some Democratic administrations like Bill Clinton. But FDR's New Deal was one of those things that's viewed as a staple in this country. And no, it did not ruin big business. There was plenty of big business growth, in fact, under his terms, under Truman's, under Eisenhower. And it's only until, the Reagan era that we started seeing this whole deference to big business, this idea that keep the government out of things. I don't like taxes. Taxes are bad. Taxes on the wealthy are bad because it's going to trickle down to me if we don't tax them as much. That's total nonsense. And then, yeah, the idea that, oh, the wealthy have your best interests in mind. No, they just want to make a profit. Oh, yeah, but they employ plenty of people, the Republicans say. Well, the idea that, oh, this makes them good, this makes them benevolent, they're not doing it out of generosity towards people if they're employing many people across the country. It's good that those people have jobs. it's good they're able to get something. But also, if you people get your way and the minimum wage were lowered or abolished, the federal minimum wage, they would be able to pay them barely anything. I mean, that's not necessarily fully the case because state minimum wage laws exist, but they also don't tend to believe that state minimum wage laws should exist either. That's the really insane thing. Now, some of them are very pro states' rights and they should say, no, they say states should be allowed to do this. But some of them are like, yeah, no, the real minimum wage is $0 an hour. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, they say. And what's crazy is I think that they would change their minds if they were in the position of being in poverty, being close to poverty even. But they're super well off, they've got a good corporate job. They've got, some income stream through podcasting like a lot of these right-wing commentators online. So they get to kick back and say, the real minimum wage is $0 an hour. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. By the way, I'm sitting in this air-conditioned studio making $600,000 a year, and I don't even have to get out of my house most days of the week. So they're totally out of touch when they do this. But yeah, that's how they gesture at the idea that we got to fight government by kissing the butt of big business. Have you ever seen that meme with the Gadsden flag, I think it is, and there's the snake being stepped on. And the snake is saying, oh, at least it's not the government stepping on me. And yeah, it's a bunch of corporations on the boot, a bunch of corporation logos on the boot. So that's the idea, is that's the way that these people think. And that's also, unfortunately, why a lot of libertarians drift Republican, There simply is more overlap between libertarians and Republicans. Libertarians may agree with the left more on social issues, but they are willing to toss those aside, toss them into the trash in order to simp for big business and say, government, leave me alone, don't tax me, don't tax those amazing corporations that do so much and hire so many workers and exploit them and steal their wages and fire people at will and all this nonsense. Yeah, we simp for big business here in the Libertarian Party. So ultimately, this is why, and I wouldn't say libertarians are as big of bootlickers as Republicans, because this is the other thing we have to bring up. Republicans bootlick law enforcement super hard. They bootlick them super hard as long as they're not going after their guys. So Donald Trump gets arrested, then law enforcement is bad. FBI bad, they went after Trump. But police kneeling on necks, killing people, that's totally fine. They especially will defend it if it's someone who's not the same race as them. Just the fact of the matter is they're going to be less sympathetic to you if you are not white. They'll do that, which is, just working backwards from their own conclusions that, oh, this person's bad, so they deserve what's coming to them. It's pretty embarrassing. So they have no right to claim that they are anti-authority. They have no right to claim that they are not bootlickers, at least most of them. Some of them are not super pro-corporate, but at the end of the day, they're voting for very corporate-friendly policies, and they're using really ridiculous, stupid justifications for it. So no, do not buy it. Also, they support abortion bans. They've talked about the idea of a nationwide abortion ban. Sounds like big government there. They've talked about a nationwide ban on same-sex marriage. Sounds like big government there. They've talked about banning porn. Sounds like big government there. So they're super obsessed with regulating your life if you're doing something that they believe to be degenerate. Of course, it's a completely arbitrary determination on their part. So they're saying, yeah, let the government ban stuff that we arbitrarily deem degenerate and bad for society and harmful to our pristine culture. So do not trust a word they say, really. Don't trust a word they say in terms of we question power. They've tried to minimize some of our constitutional rights in terms of free speech. Look at the Fourth Amendment. It's typically liberals on the Supreme Court who are trying to protect you from the government and your Fourth Amendment rights to not be unreasonably searched and seized. There are a few exceptions, conservative justices like Antonin Scalia, who were correct on the Fourth Amendment and said, no, government back out. But yeah, typically it's conservatives who are saying, give government more power, baby. Also give big business more power. They do both those at the same time. But Republican voters pretend they're anti-government and say, oh, we just support business because we don't want government stomping on them. Sorry to say, it doesn't work that way. Sorry to say, you can actually oppose both at the same time. But you're pretending, oh, we can't oppose big business because to do so would require government coming in there and beating them up. And lastly, let's talk about this idea that, oh, corporations are actually left-wing. That is total nonsense. Corporations are not left-wing. The idea that they post a pride flag on their social media page in June, no, they're just trying to make money. They're just trying to make money. If pride were not popular, if pride were not mainstream, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't see it as worth it. It would not make them a profit. So no more gaslighting about, oh, corporations are actually left-wing and it's the right who's fighting against both corporations and the government. No, you simp for corporations and you inadvertently simp for the government as well, and sometimes explicitly in terms of policing and banning so-called degenerate behavior. So hard-right Republicans, if you're watching this, please do some introspection. Realize that bootlicking big business is not a good idea. work on reforming the system. Work on reforming the system in simple, effective ways. Not about government overreach. No, common sense solutions. Some people need to pay more taxes in this country. That doesn't mean, we should tax everyone at 98%. No, we don't need necessarily to tax the wealthy even at 90%. No, marginal tax rates kick in, and so they're not effectively paying 90%. But maybe after you reach a certain point, you could pay 80, 90% on your taxes, because you're making so much money in a year. So much. You could feed the homeless. You could house the homeless. You could give all of your employees across the country a wage, a higher wage, a living wage. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. This is the Morris the Merrier, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.